There's a huge military parade coming to town this weekend. The streets around our offices are being fortified as we speak. What are you most or least looking forward to about this event?
So I am looking forward to the period costumes. I will admit to being a little bit of a sucker to see how uniforms have changed over time. What I'm not looking forward to is a Marilyn Monroe happy birthday moment for the president, courtesy of like parachuters or the army band or something. So
okay, I was going to say that was exactly what I was looking forward to.
Really?
I cannot wait to see the Golden Knights descend from the sky, parachute into the ellipse, and bestow upon Donald Trump a special American flag for the special birthday boy.
Right.
My highlight would also be musical because I love the marches of John Philip Sousa. But unfortunately, this weekend, I am pulling a Thomas Jefferson, by which I mean I am fleeing to France. This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we can't stop thinking about. I'm Drew Goins, author of the Today's Opinions newsletter.
And I'm Molly Roberts, a columnist at The Post. This week, we're talking about what it means to be in the military today.
So the topic is obviously on our minds because President Trump is throwing a massive military spectacle in D.C. It's for the 250th anniversary of the Army, but as luck would have it, or as the good Lord provided, depending on who you ask, it's also Trump's 79th birthday.
Totally a coincidence.
It's not all parades and cake, though. Also this week, the president deployed troops to face off against anti-ICE protesters in Los Angeles.
These shows of force are making us all ask what military service these days is really about. The president is sending troops, who are supposed to be nonpartisan, marching into cultural battlefields. And while he has obviously found a place for the military at home, at his birthday party, he's pointedly pulling the United States away from some of the armed forces' traditional missions abroad, like protecting and promoting democracy.
We have our colleague, Theodore, Ted, Johnson, here with us today to talk about all of this. Ted, welcome back to Impromptu.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always good to be here.
Always good to have you here. So let's start with talking about the unusual use of military force over this last week. So Trump ordered the National Guard and the Marines to LA, bypassing local authorities in doing so. And they're not just protecting federal buildings. These troops are also accompanying immigration and customs enforcement agents on immigration raids. Ted, you are a Navy man. What do you think it's like for the troops out there to be on what, on the outside, appears to be a really partisan mission? What are the considerations about politics, about legitimacy?
Yeah, the statutory reasons for the deployment, at least for the Marines, was to protect federal property, federal facilities so that they don't get damaged in any rioting. So if you're a Marine and you've been told this is your job, that is your job. And I think as long as you stay within those parameters, you can justify your service. If you are ever asked to go beyond that and maybe undertake some things that you don't agree with ethically, it could be very problematic, and there will be little guidance in the moment for what folks should do. It can put folks in a really, really tough place, and the repercussions could be career-ending if, depending on how politics and the administration handles those sorts of things.
It certainly concerns me that it looks so partisan and that it looks so personal for Trump. The idea that the president of the United States is in charge of the army goes all the way back, of course, to George Washington, who personally, physically, literally led troops to suppress the Whiskey Rebellion. In 1794, he sat astride a mighty steed and charged into battle. He had a 12,000-strong militia following him. Talk about period costumes. But the presidency, as envisioned by and for George Washington, was an apolitical presidency. His farewell address was devoted to warning against factions. That was like his whole thing. Yeah. And that is not Trump's whole thing. The Trump presidency is perhaps as political as the office has ever been. The office is as personal as it has ever been, too. He's using it to enforce his immigration policies, to make him look tough when it comes to, well, I was going to say running for office again, but he's not supposed to do that.
We'll see.
And obviously this parade is personal to celebrate the big 79, whatever he says about it.
Ted, I'm interested in this idea that you said about troops being able to justify their work on the mission. This notion of individual justification feels to me, and I'll admit here that I'm not at all a military person, kind of at odds with the ethos of serving in a body that's so much larger than you. That as I understand it, you follow your orders, you do what you're told, and you trust in this institution. I would imagine that there's less of a space for individual justification as there would be in other fields where you're not working for something with such a sense of authority. Can you just illuminate that for me a little bit?
I mean, look, the mantra is, or sort of the rules are, that you must obey lawful orders, period. And the question is on the word lawful. When does an order become lawful or unlawful? And based on whose definition of the law? When you're in the middle of a riot or you're trying to push people away from property or whatever the circumstances are, you don't have time to consult the lawyer to say, is it okay if I remove these people or if I handcuff these people or if I use, non-lethal force to stop the advance? You just follow the orders. But there are conscientious objectors. There are folks who in the moment say, look, I'm sorry, I can't do it, and accept the consequences. But we shouldn't put individual soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors in these positions. The order should be very clear. The legality of the order should be very clear. It should not be partisan, should not be political in that sense. Unfortunately, that's not the circumstances today. And we can only hope that one of those moments don't arise, because there's a saying that corporals are strategic, meaning the decisions of the youngest people in the service can have long-term strategic consequences, especially when there's not good order and discipline among the ranks.
I imagine there's no avenue for conscientious objection to parachuting out of the sky and giving the president a birthday flag.
There's plenty of partisan objection for sure.
So let's talk about that spectacle, the military parade this weekend. The costs are very clear, an estimated $45 million, about a third of which is devoted to repairing the streets that the paraders are expected to tear up. So
Incredible.
Great, looking forward to the potholes.
Right.
My poor capital bike share.
And of course, welcoming 28 tanks weighing 70 tons apiece is going to be very burdensome here in D.C. But Trump says all that is peanuts, that's a quote from him, to the parade's benefits. He thinks the event will inspire patriotism. Does it, Ted?
Oh, no, it won't. The parade won't do it. The folks that opt into watching the parade or going and viewing it in person are probably folks that are already, have an inclination towards military history, military service. Those are the folks that are already joining the military. They're the folks who are already, in supporting strong defense policy. So you're not going to win any new converts with this parade. The spectacle might be of interest for folks who just don't have much exposure to the military. So from that perspective, I think it will be good for the country to sort of get a glimpse of what everyone's fighting about and who are these folks serving and what are our tax dollars going to. But there will be no war bump. There will be no post-election bump. I think most of the nation understands that the coincidence of dates is why this parade is going to be as large as it is. One test will be in 5 months when the Navy turns 250. We'll see if there's a big water parade up the Potomac or something, or if it's forgotten because it doesn't happen to be the president's birthday.
Well, Trump loves his big, beautiful boaters, famously.
Maybe it's on his half birthday. He's not too old to celebrate those, right?
I worry that there are many, many shades of patriotism, some of them incredibly inspiring and virtuous, and some of them toxic and insidious. And I worry that this will create some patriotism for people who are going to react really excitedly when they see this spectacle aligned for Donald Trump's birthday and say, oh, maybe I should join up. Maybe the military actually isn't this apolitical force for good in the world, but rather Donald Trump's fighting force. I am very stressed by Donald Trump putting his imprimatur over the military in a way more than past commanders-in-chief have done. It feels so intricately tied to him that I think it's hard not to have young men out there see this massive display of masculinity and force and not be tempted to want to throw their weight behind that in some way.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I look at this massive display of masculinity and force and I think it's a little bit pathetic, no? Like, what are you trying to prove? That we have the most powerful army in the world? No kidding, we do. Do we have to trot out the HIMARS to prove that to people? Or are we secure in our power such that we don't have to? I mean, that's why we know who does these kinds of things. North Korea, Russia, right? They're trying to show that they are stronger probably than they are. Donald Trump was inspired by France, and not to rag on France, but if you want to talk about the
they're
most
not going to let me in.
yeah, enjoy your trip, but if you want to talk about the most powerful militaries in the world, I don't know, man. So it's a little, the lady doth protest too much, methinks, and I don't imagine Trump wants to be called a lady.
I will say the United States has not been immune to this sort of display before. We've had inaugurations that have been accompanied by military parades. JFK's in the middle of the Cold War saw the nukes being rolled down the street. I think there's massive power in just the aesthetic display of force. I think for the keenest of observers, it might not do much, but for just the average person out there who sees on the evening news all these tanks in DC, you're like, oh my goodness.
I saw some tanks after January 6th, to be fair, which is part of maybe what makes me feel queasy about this whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say that there's a distinction between public affairs and celebration parades and parades for psychological operations. If you look at a parade from North Korea, for example, that is absolutely a message to the world about the kinds of missiles they have and how many they have and how united the public is. But what's happening on Saturday isn't that. This is really about pride and celebration. And the reason I think actually not even the reason I think, the reason it is so politicized is because Donald Trump first wanted this in his first administration and both parties told him no. And now he's managed to get it by co-opting a 250 celebration that was going to happen anyway under Biden at a much reduced scale. Right. Because it seems like his birthday is the real reason for it and not the army.
That raises an interesting question that I think we should ask ourselves, which is whether under a different president whose birthday it wasn't, who had not asked for this before and had the ask denied, would we react so aversely to a military parade at all? Is it possible that under different circumstances we would find a military parade inspiring or cool, or at least not worrisome?
Maybe. I mean, flyovers are cool. I definitely think the fact that Trump is at this exact same time co-opting the military for partisan and personal purposes in Los Angeles gives people way more reason for justified pause than some generic Mr. President.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm not immune to seeing, oh, tank, cool. It brings out, a certain 4-year-old sensibility to me. I'm suddenly playing with action figures again. I think we've asked ourselves the question, and I think we can fairly answer it and say, this is a matter of the slow creep toward autocracy, right? This feels icky because of certain circumstances, not just because, we, for partisan reasons, dislike Trump. I think there is a bigger picture here that we are objecting to.
Yeah, and I think that back to the earlier question about if it was a different president, sort of absent the Trump persona and the marketing machine that follows him everywhere, I think the parade would be sort of that's cool, and America would go about its business. Even in inaugural parades when there's been a lot of military equipment there, it's usually because the president being inaugurated served in the military, like Kennedy or especially Eisenhower. It was a pretty big military parade. So I do think
you're right.
The parade is for matters some, for sure.
All right, we are going to talk more about all of this, as well as what's going on with the U.S. military abroad and how its mission is changing under this administration. But that'll be right after the break.
Welcome back. I'm Molly Roberts, and this is Impromptu. So, President Trump gave a graduation speech at West Point a few weeks ago, where he said, and I'm not going to try to do a Trump impression here, the job of the United States Armed Forces is not to host drag shows. Okay, I was a little tempted there. Is not to host drag shows, to transform foreign cultures, or to spread democracy to everybody around the world at the point of a gun. The military's job is to dominate any foe and annihilate any threat to America. How does this sentiment differ or align with how you guys conceive of the role of the American military?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, that is a job in wartime, to dominate, to be successful, to accomplish the mission. But people don't join for that reason. I think it was Senator Cotton a couple years ago said something like, young Americans join the military because they want to kill the bad guys. No, it's not. Most Americans join the military for job stability, training, education benefits, housing benefits, healthcare benefits, travel, camaraderie. It is not to kill people. And so this idea that, young Americans join the military so they can kill the bad guys and dominate the world is so incorrect that there's not even like much of a rebuttal. It just signals someone who doesn't understand the military and doesn't know people who serve in the military, certainly not at any level of real depth.
Ted, I'm going to ask you to impute not the motives of individual service members, but what to you is the function of the military as an institution writ large then?
Yeah, I think it is defense of the country in service of the nation's interests, done in a way that's consonant with the constitutional authorities vested in the folks giving them orders to do these things. So it doesn't always mean that the military members will agree with what's happening. Doesn't always mean the military will be used in a moral or ethical way. But the job of the military is to defend and advance/secure the nation's interests, but to do so in a way that is lawful, both according to our own laws and constitution, and ideally to the international recognized laws of warfare and human treatment and dignity and that sort of thing. So presidents always use the military as they see fit, and it usually expands the authority rather than reducing it.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit and say that I listened to this definition and I'm like, there's a little bit of an appealing simplicity here. There's a certain directness about this is what the job of the military is. We should not cloud it with these other things. And to me, as kind of a pacifist deep at heart, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, why can't the Peace Corps be expanded and provide stability and healthcare and all of these things to people who would otherwise join the military? But I think that the way that the military's place in the American imagination has just grown so large, it makes it very hard to love the United States without loving the United States military. And I think that in Trump's definition here, and to be clear, I'm giving the president a whole lot of credit. I think there is a directness that is in a way beguiling to people who might like to separate love for the United States from love for the United States military.
I agree about the simplicity of it, and to me it sums up his foreign policy ideology pretty perfectly, which I guess makes sense because it's a quote from him. But a lot of people say, Donald Trump's an isolationist. He's not really an isolationist.
No.
I mean, tell that to the Houthis. He intervenes sometimes. It's just that his interventions don't really exist in accordance with any set of ideals or values. Their sole purpose is to project or perform power, and he pursues profit sometimes too. And that really is a departure from what has been the status quo since the beginning of the Pax Americana, the expectation that the United States will step in on the side of freedom, on the side of democracy around the world, versus step in for, again, just power. It is totally reasonable, I think, now as the world order is sort of changing to reconsider that, to say, well, maybe we should look harder when we're considering taking an action at whether it's in the United States' interests. The problem with Trump, I think, is that he's not all that interested in the United States' interests in some strategic, analytical, bigger picture way, or at least too often he conflates the United States' interests with his own interests.
Yeah. I want to step out of this kind of imagined world that I was creating a second ago and back into the real one, though, where the United States military does occupy this enormous role. And the earlier part of Trump's quote, where he says the job is not to, transform foreign cultures to spread democracy, the fact that the military is as big as it is and as powerful as it is, I think that there's a case to be made that it does have the responsibility to do those things. I was at a birthday for another military a couple of weeks ago at the German ambassador's residence. This was the 70th birthday of the German armed forces.
Younger than Trump.
True. The new German armed forces, not the old ones. I want to be clear. And there was a guy in the German Air Force who gave a short speech about how he decided he wanted to join the military when he was, as a student, on a trip to the United States, and he saw Top Gun for the first time. And so that is a soft power presentation of American hard power, right? And I think that is a transformation of foreign culture that is kind of the military at its best.
When I saw the shirtless beach volleyball scene in Top Gun Maverick, I thought maybe I should join the military.
Yeah, I'll just say it's the same military. So the Top Gun guy dropping bombs on bad guys is also the shirtless dude in Coronado Beach,
Right.
Saturday afternoon. It's the same military, same guy, same family that's left behind, hoping daddy comes home, And so I will say that I spent far more time in humanitarian assistance and natural disaster relief in uniform than I did in war. So you're absolutely right. There is an amazing, incredible, far more expansive than I think most of the country understands soft power presence and use of the United States military. Now, you get into trouble when that soft power presence always has a missile attached to it, or has a threat of the use of force attached to it. So even the good elements of the military community can be sort of weaponized for partisan or unethical purposes in terms of foreign policy interest or national security. But that same military can be leveraged for such good and to hold its trigger finger for so long that the sort of character of the military matches the character of the nation that is often, fair or not, embodied by whoever sits in the White House. So to the extent there's critiques of the military, there are probably the same critique could be made of the country. And we always said in the military that the folks here are just a microcosm of the folks in the country. So every problem you see in the country, you're going to see in the military, to include the negative aspects, but also the really positive civic, social parts of our nation and our military.
Well, on that note, which I think is truly patriotic, we will wrap this up.
That's as good as it gets.
Dum 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 dum.
You can sing that, or you can sing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President."
All right, cut the tape. Cut the tape.
It was great talking to both of you.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks, Ted.
This episode was produced by Hadley Robinson and Regina DeHeer, edited by Jasmine Green, and mixed by Emma Munger. Special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne. Thanks for listening to Impromptu. Please send us your thoughts about what the military means today. Email impromptu@washpost.com. And as always, if you're enjoying the show, share your favorite episode with your friends. You can find us every Friday wherever you get your podcasts.